Good evening. Thanks for having me. Shout out to you, Miss Fullwood, for putting this all together. I appreciate it. As we move forward, parents, again, this is the webinar for Behind Every Data Point as a Child, and I think that we should elaborate a little bit more to say behind data points, because it's so many different points that we are making sure that we keep in mind as we support your student or support your child. All right, as we get started, I want to just say thank you to all of you who are joining us, right? Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, guardians. It takes a village to make sure that we are doing what's right for your child and your children. So again, thank you for joining us and thank you for being our partners in success. We certainly cannot do it without you. And then as Ms. Fullwood mentioned, I did want to point out again that it is being recorded. So just a reminder that we want to keep your child and their information private. So if you have specific questions, certainly feel free to reach out to us. Again, she said, I obviously am Michelle Toscani, and I'm in the Assessment and Accountabilities Office. And then again, Miss Angela Fullwood is in the Climate and Culture Office. So we appreciate you guys having, spending your time with us tonight, as she mentioned. As we move forward, our goals. So this is our goal for Hillsborough County. This is our goal, is that we have happy, prepared, and successful students, and they become happy and prepared, successful adults. And it's not when we're thinking about maybe as a second grader, right? We want to think about them graduating and walking across the stage, but we want to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to deliver a rigorous education and making sure that they're successful here with us. So tonight we're going to cover these questions that you see on the screen. We've got a lot of things to cover. And I understand that you guys have probably spent a really long time today at work and doing other things. And so we're all pretty tired. So I appreciate that you're here with me and hang in there. I did want to note, just like the kids asked me on a test, how many questions are on the test, right? I'm going to give you as parents information that there are 53 slides tonight of amazing information, and it ranges from kindergarten to meeting our 12th graders for graduation. So I'm going to give you kind of a general overview of these questions, and then how we're going to best do what we can to partner with you to make sure that we're successful. Your child is successful, most importantly. All right, so the question you see, what are the key questions I should be asking the teacher or school staff? And that really is something that I want to remind you to be a great advocate for your child. So some of the questions to ask, is my child on track? What assessments has my child taken? What do these scores mean? What areas of growth should I prioritize? What resources can you suggest that we use at home? And then how does this impact my child? And certainly I want to kind of focus on, is my child on track question? And that could be so many different levels. And so tonight we're going to talk about a variety of different assessments that are given. And with regard to those assessments, we can determine kind of what level they're falling in. And so there are other suggestions that I have as we move forward. Then how can I help as a parent, or how can I help as the person who is guiding this child as they move through life, right? So make sure the number one thing is that you partner with your child's school. That's the number one, most important. Again, I can't say it enough. So if your child, so this can range right from many teachers to just one. Get familiar with resources that can help. And those are things that the teachers can help you with or the school can help you with. Establishing a bedtime routine. And some of my, if you are on here and you have older children, you might be like, oh, come on, I can't handle this, right? But it's extremely important, and really speaks to the level of their health if they're able to get a good night's sleep, be able to think clearly as they're at school during the day, and that they're not falling asleep, and that they can be focused and attentive and making sure that everything is on point with regard to that. So the next one, holding your child accountable. And this is a really tough one. I understand, I've got kids at home, and so it really is work, more work for us as parents and guardians, to make sure that we keep them accountable. And what does accountable mean? So if they have the expectation that they're supposed to be getting a specific amount of minutes of reading per night, or a specific amount of minutes on a computer program, that we hold them to that. And really, I want to kind of flip it as I refocus you a little bit onto this as we look at the celebrate, right? So I'm going to go down a few. So if we're holding them accountable and they are getting those minutes, or, hey, I just need you to read 10 minutes. And just as a suggestion, because I have mostly worked in the elementary world, but I have high school student, I have a high school child myself. And really, as a parent, it can, if they're assigned potentially 30 minutes of reading, just ask them to do 10 minutes, put a quick 10-minute timer on and move them forward, at least that they're getting something in, right? And they're successful in that. Give them a little bit of a break and then work up as we move towards the amount of minutes that they were, but really hold them accountable and celebrate with them as they are achieving the great things that they're doing. Another suggestion too is to read with them. Reading is by far the number one thing that can help a child to be successful. So the strength in their reading is going to give them so many opportunities. So I want you to remember that there's just a variety of ways that can happen, right? Read with them on the computer, read with them in a magazine, even if you're doing if you're cooking, if they're reading a recipe for you. All of those things add up. All of those things matter. And then with regard to reading, then ask them questions. So talk to them about what they just read. So you're really getting them comfortable with talking about what their comprehension of that was, and being able to stretch their thinking and be able to use the vocabulary that they've just read about. And then, of course, like I had mentioned before, back on to celebrate. We can't celebrate with our kids enough. That really helps to motivate them and keeps their self-esteem high. So that's extremely important as we're thinking about all students, right? So really important for our struggling learners, but also really important for our high achieving students who, they're used to doing well on assessments, but they need to hear awesome job. All of our kids and adults really too, for that matter, right? We as adults need to hear awesome job. But our kids, hands down, number one, that's the one thing that's going to keep them going and keep them motivated, is when you're excited when they're achieving great things. All right, as I move on, some more questions that I want to shift thinking, right, as those last questions were parents and what you can do to help, and the previous questions were questions that you could think about asking and partnering with your school. These are questions that I put together because I need and want our high school students to become good advocates for themselves. So that will clearly help them later on in life. But currently, and even in my work that I'm doing with other things in our district, I'm seeing a lack of this advocacy. So unfortunate things are happening, and I don't want those things to happen. So I would like our high school students and our parents to push those high school students to ask these questions. Who is my assigned guidance counselor? Your child who's in high school should know who their assigned guidance counselor is. If they don't, certainly a quick phone call to the school can help to determine that, or clearly ask them again to be good advocates for themselves. So they could go to one of their teachers and say, hey, can you help me figure out who my guidance counselor is? The next question then, am I on track to graduate? So there are different diploma options, and I know that I'm going to do a quick commercial, right? And so we're going to actually have another parent webinar that is, what does my high schooler need to graduate? And that's going to be on November the 17th at 5 p.m. But this is also, and they're going to cover everything with regard to high school. But I still want our kids to be good advocates here as we're talking about data points and everything else. They need to be on track or tracking those data points. And some of those data points, right, are the courses that they've completed and or courses that they may have not completed, that we need to make sure that we put them on track so that they can graduate with their cohort. And so then, as I mentioned, what diploma am I working toward? And then what do I need to be successful? So that might be the child asking that question, but I also want you as parents to encourage your child to be a good advocate for themselves too. So if they need something else in their classrooms to be successful, encourage them to ask for those things, and encourage them to continue to ask until they receive them, because it's really important that we make sure that we're differentiating based on the needs of our children in every single classroom. All right, moving on, and this next question brings us to, who do I speak with regarding my child's data? And clearly the number one person or people needs to be the teacher. And I just, I mentioned that before, but it is so important that that is the person who's driving your child's education, really, right? So based upon these data points that we're going to cover and look at and kind of dig into, the teacher is going to be the one who knows and understands, based upon what your child has shown them that they're capable of doing. The teacher is going to be able to speak best to how they're doing in the class. So again, just a reminder, that can look many different ways. Some students have two teachers, right? They might have a reading and writing teacher somewhat, and then the other teacher is a math science teacher. That could look like that at the elementary level. Then all the way up through high school, you could have a variety of teachers, 7 different teachers. And then of course, if your child is receiving other services, whether it be exceptional student services because they have an area of eligibility, or if they're receiving ELL services, which is our students who speak other languages, so English is not their first language, they also would have a support person who will support them in making sure that they're successful. All right. This slide also shows, as I spoke to the teacher being your number one person, your number one go-to person, there's also a variety of other supporters in the school.
Michelle,
so I want to just point.
I want to stop you here because we had a good question
Okay.
in the chat. It says, what is the data collection going to be like for e-learners?
That is a great question. So the data collection for e-learners does actually look the same for brick and mortar students. So they're expected to turn in their assignments. They will have tests and assessments that, and pretty much e-learners have basically the same assessments that we have as brick and mortar students. They're just being delivered online. So, and I do have to preface that with most are being delivered online. The more rigorous and secure assessments we're having families bring their child into the school to be able to take those rigorous, secure assessments. But the data collection for that and the expectation for that too, district-wide, is just the same. And I hope I answered that. So clarify if there's any need for clarification, please let me know. Continuing on with this slide, then of course the other people within the school that's there to support your child. So there's school counseling services, and as you can read that the school counseling program is comprehensive, but they really focus on personalized and personal and social development of the child. But the guidance counselor also at the higher level, those are the people that you want to see to make sure that we're on track for graduation. So it kind of runs the gamut of support based upon the level that you're looking at. Of course, our health services team, our nurses in our schools, and other health services, CNAs, if you will, depending upon what school and the level of the need in the school. But those people are really there to make sure also that your child is feeling healthy. And obviously, if they're not feeling healthy, they're not going to be really great in the classroom. So we want to make sure that we partner with them to make sure that we're doing everything to keep them healthy and safe. In the top corner, then I want to highlight psychological services. So that's our school psychiatrist school psychologist. We don't have psychiatrists on staff. Let me quote that again. Our school psychological services is our school psychologist. And that person really helps to drive and look at, are we meeting the needs of the students the best that we possibly can? They're key partners in conversations that we have with regard to struggling students, and also key partners in conversations with regard to, is my child eligible for gifted services, right? So for our high achieving students as well. So they're really that partner in looking at the psychoeducational aspect of our children. Then last but not least, because these are amazing people in our schools, all of our social workers really help to support needs of students and families. And I can't highlight this enough. I know personally I've had some just amazing people that I've been surrounded with that are social workers in our district, and they really work hard to help support you as a family. So if you have other needs, please don't feel hesitant to ask, because the social work department in our school district really has a pulse on resources and different things in our communities that can help support you. So if you're struggling to get maybe uniforms for your children, they can help partner to find uniforms or be able to get those uniforms for you. There's other housing options that we could help with. So it really runs a wide range of support system that you could seek with regard to our social worker.
I do have a question about 504 and IEPs. So the question is specifically for kids with IEPs and 504s. The question reads, is it possible not only to address their needs online, but also to review their progress? So their child needs a one-on-one, a one-to-one ratio to attend e-learning, which they provide at home. So it's pretty hard to be accurate since he does not have a one-on-one at the school.
Right. So that certainly is a situation that is difficult in the pandemic that we're in. I'll be very honest. And I come from being a teacher of students with disabilities. And so I know that we are giving the grace really to think about different ways of supporting our students in their education right now in this pandemic. So that really is something that I want to encourage you as the parent to reach out to the school and really think about different ways. So if you're concerned about the services that you're being provided, I want you to reach out and say, I'm concerned about those services, and what are some things that maybe we can do to help facilitate the best education for my child. So I certainly appreciate that we've given kind of the ability for parents to make the choice to, do I want my child in brick and mortar, or do I want my child e-learning? And that is a parent choice. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And I think that at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're all working collaboratively to support our kids and where they're at. So we need to meet them where they're at. So if this child is at home e-learning and requires this amount of support, I can't say thank you enough to you as the parent for providing that one-on-one support. It's just going to look a little bit differently with regard to the amount of differentiation that they may need. So I would also partner with the ESE teacher who should be providing those services at a differentiated level. And so if they typically do receive that one-on-one support, then they would typically receive a differentiated level. So again, just partner with the school, and they'll be able to help you to kind of work through that. All right, then as we move in, so why do we test students? Whew, that's a big one, right? I think that we all are getting overwhelmed, if you will, right? We're overwhelmed in this pandemic as we sit with where we're at, but we're also thinking, how many tests are there, right? So I really want to remind you as parents that you're our partners in this, and you're our partners in understanding that we test because it supports instruction and it supports student learning, right? So with regard to why we test, the teacher has to build a strong differentiated lesson to meet the needs of all learners. And testing helps us as educators, right? It helps the teachers to determine what do they need. So for example, if they taught a lesson, and a lot of lessons end with, and we'll move into this as formative assessments, a lot of the lessons might end with a small, what we call an exit ticket, or something for the child to do to make sure that the teacher knows that they understood what they were taught that day. So we want them to show what they know. And with regard to showing what they know, that helps the teacher determine, did all of the students struggle with that? Did only a few students struggle with that? So really on a day-to-day basis, they're moving and adjusting and being very flexible in their teaching to be able to provide differentiation. So if, say, there's a class of 20 students and 4 or 5 of them showed that they really needed some reteaching with that, then the teacher would build the next lesson keeping in mind that those 4 to 5 students are going to need some small group intervention and be able to reteach that so that they can move forward also. And then as we also look at this, the test helps to determine whether students are equipped with the knowledge so that they can be ready for college and career, right? So I spoke just a minute ago at a small level, right, with regard to the lesson that may be taught during the day. Then I want to go into a larger scope, and we're thinking about our bigger assessments that can kind of determine or show us really where is that child going, how many standards do they know and understand and are able to apply based upon the assessment that they've been given, and then will that assessment help them to grow once they're showing what they know. That assessment is going to give us an idea based upon the level that they land at to see, are they ready for college and career? Are they ready to go to the next grade level? there's so many questions that can come out from those assessments. So it really is important to have the assessments that we have. And like I mentioned, so we have what's called formative assessments. There are formative assessments, which happen throughout, and then there are summative assessments, which are at the end. So the general goal of the formative assessment is to collect detailed information that can be used to improve instruction, just like I had mentioned. So that really is the goal of it. And then what makes the assessment formative is that it's there to inform. It informs the teacher, and informs the ESC teacher, and informs anybody who's there to support either paras that come in. And then the thing about Hillsborough County being so large, we as a district can kind of calculate percentile norms off of our formative assessments. And we can look at that because we have approximately 15,000 students per grade level. That's quite a number. So we really have a strong snapshot, if you will, of what our students look like, our student achievement looks like across that grade level. Just want to make sure I covered everything. Just one second. Formative assessments. My apologies, one second. So formative assessments help teachers to identify concepts that students are struggling to understand. And I really did cover that, so I feel like I can move forward. And then what assessments are administered? As we're looking at what assessments are administered, I want you to take a deep breath with me and know that it's going to be okay, because I don't want you to feel overwhelmed as we look at the assessments. There are a lot, and I did that because I want to be transparent about what we do as educators and what we think is important. Not that testing is end all be all, because it's really not. The end all be all is happy, successful, prepared students as we move to the end. And so with this slide, I want to point out we have district measures there on the left, and we did just finish kind of a battery of assessments, if you will, right across the board. And so we have baseline assessments that happened. And as you can see, those baseline assessments here on the slide. So we had ELA, which is your reading assessment, and that's grades 2 through 5. Math was grades 2 through 8. Science is grades 5 and 8. And then of course, algebra, geometry, US history, civics, and biology. So those are baseline assessments that happen. Now, this is where we kind of get into when you're speaking to the school, when you're sitting down with a teacher, when you're doing a Zoom conference, because it looks a little different now, right? But the great thing is that we want to make sure we're partnering with you to understand what you need, or what it is that we can all do, right, to help your child. So again, back to the baseline assessments. Those assessments happened, but I do want you to know baseline assessments are end of year assessments. So what that means is your child took, if say they're in 4th grade, they took the assessment that is the end of the year 4th grade assessment. And we don't expect them to do well on that. So when the teacher tells you, well, they didn't do so awesome, that's okay, because that is really geared towards telling the teacher what they need to teach your child during the school year. So it covers all of the standards in that assessment. All of the standards for that specific subject are covered, and we will kind of see different ranges, right? Your child may have done very well with regard to one standard, and they know that they can be successful in that standard. And there may be other standards that we really need to focus in on. Now, remembering that we are all the way, most of the way through an entire, not most of the way, we are done with one entire grading period. And we just this past Monday started a new grading period. So we have 9 weeks roughly under our belts. And so as we're moving and thinking about what can we do to maintain the growth for your child, these are assessments that will help us to do that.
Okay, Michelle, I want to chime in here. Had a question, and I think you kind of covered it, but I want to be sure that Ms. Rosario gets her question answered. She said, with kids taking tests in the classroom from the lessons from day to day, from week to week, and also iReady and also all the other online platforms, how do we know if our child is really ready, really moving forward without seeing the grades? Is there a difference between paper tests and online tests? And I believe you answered, but I just want to make sure that it's totally clear for her.
That's a hefty question, Miss Rosario. Shout out to you, because those are the questions that you are needing to ask the school, and I will actually answer. But I also want you to be that amazing advocate continually, because that is a beautiful question. So there are, so in thinking about each child, right? I'm going to start with the end of the question, right? Is there a difference between online assessments and paper pencil assessments? And I will tell you, so from experience, as an elementary AP, I was blessed with just having conversation with students one day. And I was talking to them as they were getting ready to start a computer-based assessment. And we were talking about, I was kind of giving them motivation, and you're going to do great, no worries. And a student spoke up and he said, I really wish that this was paper pencil. And so I will be very honest. I think that we do have some students who are more adept at the paper pencil. And I think that we have students who are strong at computer-based assessments. From watching students take the test, I do know that obviously paper pencil, they're able to grab that paper and pencil and they're able to mark on it. They're able to circle words. They're able to write notes out to the side. And that really makes a difference in their thought process and their ability to be successful in it. And so when you're on the computer, sometimes it's much harder for students to be able to navigate if they're having to drag to see the paragraph and then be able to comprehend the question, but the question's down in a different area. So that's what it does look like across the board. Unfortunately, we can't get away from that. But I do agree, and that's a very valid question, is does online or paper pencil, are those different? And then Ms. Fullwood, if you would also read me again the beginning of that question.
Sure. She says, how would they know if their child is really moving forward without seeing the grades?
Yes, with all of these assessments, right? So that is where you should have regular notes coming home. You should have regular communication that's happening with the teacher. If they're saying your child's on track, that I would hope that you can trust that. But I understand as a parent, we want to kind of see it before we really believe it. So I want to encourage you to reach out to the teacher and say, are there things that you can send me home so that I know that they're on track? And that conversation needs to go back and forth, and you absolutely anytime should request a conference. It shouldn't just be on conference night or when we do our main conference nights, twice a year as a district. This should be a constant collaboration between you and the teacher. And if you feel that those needs aren't being met, then I suggest that you are asking for a conference.
There isn't one more question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Is there a difference in the value of the result from the paper test versus the online test?
Oh, I gotcha. No, there really is not a difference in the value. So per se. The values come differently and they look differently. So each assessment really has its range. So iReady would have scale scores, and I'll go more in depth with that. If you can hang tight on that, I'm going to write myself a note. And I feel like I'll answer it later on as you see some other slides that I go through. So here,
one more. Is there a request that they have to do for a paper pencil test as an option?
Can you clarify with that? Because would it be for a typical child, or is it a child with exceptional student services?
Does your child have ESC services? Typical. It's a typical child.
Okay. And I'm hesitant on the answer, right? Clearly, as you can tell. With regard to the request for, so I'm guessing that they're speaking of our baseline assessments that were done on computer. And that really is something that is determined by the school. And so that would be something that you could ask, I would ask. Now, as we move forward, then well, I can't say most. The district measures are some are on computer and some are paper pencil. A lot of them were on computer, and that is because we are able to get the data points back. We are able to determine things quicker. We are able to support your child a little bit better if we're able to give those assessments on the computer. Then with regard to iReady, we have iReady supporting reading and math, and then again, that's elementary only. We also have Achieve, and as we look through the year with regard to assessments, our Achieve assessments, again, kind of mirror those big assessments. We have them 3 times a year, beginning of the year, mid-year, and then end of the year. I will move forward to the next slide, which also provides us with some other data points that may be given to your child. Now, I do want to say this, and I hope you hear me loud and clear. Not all of these assessments are given to your child. So this depends on their need, and it depends on the school. So I will note that the ELA monthlies and the math monthlies, some schools are doing those monthlies in place of chapter assessments, and some schools are giving chapter assessments and not the monthlies. So that's really important to note, because that really is across the board in all levels of our schools. In elementary, I want to note that we do what's called flickers, and that's a readiness assessment for our kindergartners. We have new this year what's called SIPs, and that's for kindergarten through 2nd grade, and that is a learn to read program, right? Once we get older, we read to learn things, but this is a learn to read program. So this is really building the foundation for your child. The DRA is a diagnostic reading assessment, and that is another assessment that may be given to your child. And I'll be very honest, a lot of schools are kind of shifting away from that and moving in towards the other things like SIPs, because SIPs actually has instruction that is embedded right with it, so they can be placed within a specific lesson and be able to meet their needs based upon how they did on the placement assessment for SIPs. And then, of course, for our students who have a different first language than English, they are students, our ELL students, and they would also take the WIDA. And then noting our high school long list of assessments. because they're getting to the point where they're wanting to prepare. They're going to be college and career ready. As we progress our students through elementary and middle school, once they hit high school, we want to make sure that they're strongly prepared and they're looking at what is it that I want to do after I graduate. And so it does look like a long list of assessments, and I'll get into depth with them later, is that it adds the SAT, ACT, and the PERT. At the end of the year, we typically take FSA. So I just want to quickly highlight what grade levels and assessments are taken, what subjects and grade levels are taken with FSA and EOC, which is end of course testing. So all students in grades 3 through 10 are participating in an ELA assessment. Now I will tell you, if your child is not successful on that assessment as a 10th grade student, they will also take that as 11th and 12th grader and until they are able to be successful. Then of course, we have grades 3 through 8 participating in statewide math assessment, which is the FSA. And then all students in grades 5 and 8 are taking the science assessment. And the science assessment is a little bit different with regard to the fact that, for example, the 5th grade students are actually testing on standards all the way from lower grade. So that's something that we really want to make sure that we're also focused in on to meet the needs of our kids, because it's cumulative so that they can make sure that they're successful. And then at the end, these are our end of course testing exams. Those students are enrolled in algebra, geometry, civics, biology, or US history. And of course they take those. And those are really specific with regard to graduation requirements as well. I wanted to also note that we have the FSA, so students with severe cognitive disabilities also participate, if I could talk, sorry, my friends. The FSA is what it's called. So Florida alternate assessment, and those students with cognitive abilities will take the English language arts in grades 3 through 10. Then also kind of mirroring the FSA, in grades 3 through 8 will participate in math. And then students who are enrolled in the courses of these courses will take the exam. All right, moving into Achieve 3000. As we've partnered with Achieve 3000 this year as a school district, this is new to us, but certainly an amazing resource that we have here. So what is Achieve? So it's an online literacy program, and it provides nonfiction reading content. So this is different. Those of us elementary people have been used to iReady. And so iReady is nonfiction and fiction, whereas Achieve is just nonfiction. So this is something that will come up. So as you have conversation with the teacher about your child's levels, so their Achieve iReady Lexile score may look different than the iReady Lexile score, and that is okay. That is absolutely okay. It's because that Achieve is just specific to nonfiction text. And so I want to note really what Achieve focuses on is building phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, reading comprehension, vocabulary, and their writing skills. So students are given lessons that encompass all of those things. Achieve did a Lexile study, and they noted that they can generate 3 times the level of Lexile gains when used with fidelity. So what does that mean? What does used with fidelity mean? That is, if as the teacher is given them lessons that are consistent consistently rigorous, but consistently on their level so that they can grow, then the child will be able to build their reading comprehension knowledge and abilities. I do want to note here, so this is put out by Achieve, and this is what you will see once you speak with the teacher, and you can ask this, right? So if you look on the left-hand side, you will see the grade level listed, and then you will see not on track and on track. And what Achieve does is they're really looking at their college and career readiness. So I'm hesitating because I like the next slide for what I want to say next, but I may just go back. So give me a quick second. So you'll see on this slide actually that the grade level Lexile is listed here. And I just want to point out our fifth grade says 565 to 910. That's a big range, right? So we're thinking about the range that the child will be reading in throughout the school year. And that's a big range, like I said. So as we're looking here, 565 still falls in that approaches, which means like beginning fifth grade level. And then moving to 910, we're moving into the meets grade level, and we're on track to being college and career ready. So that's the most important thing that Achieve is pushing, is knowing that a certain reading level is where they need to go to be able to be successful, right, later in life. So kids who are stronger readers typically have better jobs, right? They typically make more money. And so what we want to just make sure that we are doing is building the strength in our students, because as we're building their reading level, we're also building their ability in other subjects as well. So as they're taking math, those problems get really rigorous and they get really long. And so if your child is struggling to read that math assessment, they might be a great math student, but if they're struggling to read and understand that problem, that will hinder their success. So the more we can work on the students' reading and that comprehension and understanding, the better it will be, the more successful they will be. All right, and then going back to this to be a little more specific. So to get to this level of differentiation for students, we want to access each student's reading level at the beginning of the year, right? So that's what we just did with that baseline. When we took the baseline, or the level set, excuse me. So the district assessments are called baselines. Achieve is called the level set. And so within that level set, that really sets them on a track for making sure that they're going to get what they need to be successful. And so tracking college and career readiness in the lower grades seems early. As we're thinking about this, in Hillsborough County, we start Achieve in grade 3. And we're starting that tracking in grade 3, and that's extremely important to make sure that we build into, if there's an area of weakness, we make sure that we build that. And we want to do that at a younger level so that our kiddos aren't struggling as they're moving forward. They feel strong in their ability as they're moving forward, right? So if we're tracking their ranges in the early grades, the teacher has time to address the needs of the child. So Achieve also noted that their researchers linked the students' Lexile scores to the success on the high stakes assessments. So what does that even mean? The high stakes assessments are like our FSA at the end of the year, right? So they can determine if your child is reading at this specific level on Achieve, they're more likely to be at this specific level on the FSA. So if they're at a higher Lexile level, then they're more apt to be getting a 4 or 5 on the FSA, if that makes sense.
I'd like to pause here, and answer or ask you a question from a parent. The question was, how can I help my child if she is struggling with reading and she's in
Mhm.
first grade?
I appreciate that question because that really is one of the most critical year, is the most critical year. Um, and our first grade students are expected to grow the most with regard to some of the assessments, to be really like on track for reading. That's the year that they're given they're building the foundation of phonemic awareness and phonics. And so if your child is struggling, again, back to partnering with the school. So they should be giving you, the teacher should be giving you specific things that you can be working on. And then as we move forward, I know that certainly Achieve has lessons online, and iReady has lessons online as well. I suggest working on those lessons that are geared specifically for your child. So again, Achieve is for older kiddos, and I know that you mentioned your kiddo is a first grade student. So iReady, as we get to it, iReady is really built to make to help fill in those gaps. But I need you to promise me one thing. Make sure it's your child doing the work, because I know, and I do it too. Trust me, I just stood over my son the other day and helped him with something, and I was like, oh no, I can't be doing that because it's not him. So these are adaptive assessments. So Achieve, as we're talking about, and I can move forward on this slide. Achieve, as we're talking about, but iReady also, it's adaptive. So if you're helping your child while they're on that particular platform, then it's going to think that the child is doing better and better and better. So it will adjust to make things harder, and certainly looking like that's the level that your child is at. So please make sure to kind of hold yourself back and not give that support to your child so that the program can do the work that is needed to support your child. And then the great thing about all these programs is it really does show the teacher kind of the growth of how your child's progressing through the year. So stay on top of the conversations that you're having with the teacher on how is my child doing. Now, I want to say also, and this goes across the board, from this week to next week, you're not going to see that much of a growth. So we've got to give it a little bit of a time. We've got to give it consistency and practice. So read with your child every single day is the most important thing. And just make sure that you're gearing it towards exactly what their needs are. So if they're a reluctant reader at this point, then maybe you read a sentence and then have them read a sentence, or even just a few words. Sometimes you could just ask them to do the kind of the fill-in words, if you will, the is, the in, the it, if that's where they're at. So kind of meet their needs specifically where they're at, and again, partner with the school to make sure that there aren't other resources that you can be giving and supporting with your child at home.
I have another question.
Oftentimes, yeah, and oftentimes, just real quick, teachers will send home flashcards and things that for sight words at that age. Go ahead with the question.
Um, One of they were told that that we are no longer using FSA. Is this true?
No, that is not true.
Okay, and then I have another question about if you have a typical student performing well on the assessment but performing poorly with testing, what other factors could account for this discrepancy?
Yeah, that's a hard one. So if in their day to day they're doing well, we really want to figure out would it be test taking anxiety, and that really is something that, I mean, I have had a lot of students in the past that have had test taking anxiety. So we really have to drill down to figure out how is it that they're so successful during the school day, and then when it comes time to test, they're struggling. So that's another partnership with the teacher. You know, what are you seeing? Are they in the best test taking environment for them? maybe they're extremely distracted during the test. And that's really something I can't speak to unless I can really get in and learn your child. So again, that person, that number one person is going to be the teacher. Noting here on Achieve 3000, so this is something that just I absolutely love. Coming from teaching struggling learners my entire career, the way Achieve differentiates their topics is that they adjust the Lexile levels. So each student, no matter what Lexile level they are at, are receiving not the same text because it's differentiated based on their readability, if you will. But they are able to read the same topic. And this just makes me so happy, to be honest, because then kids who are struggling learners are still able to have that same conversation and add to the conversation, which also adds to their learning and understanding of the content. And so this is something that really is, in my opinion, really phenomenal piece of what Achieve does with regard to their support to us. And then the biggest thing, like I said, once we're looking at this, is their college and career readiness focus. And these connect to Lexile in their careers, right? So it's just noting what careers and what Lexile level they would need to be successful in that career. And I'm noting the time. I will be very honest, we've got quite a few slides to go. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. Again, remember that this is going to be recorded. So if it's getting too much for you, I totally understand. You can come back and review this. But we have about 20-ish more slides to go, 25 or so. That and so now I'm going to go right into iReady. So what is iReady? It is an online program for reading and math, and a lot of us are more comfortable with iReady, right? Because we've had this in our district for quite a while. And it helps the teacher to determine your students' needs. It really drills it down for us and really helps to support in reading and math. So it's identifying those areas of struggle and is able to kind of fill those in for us. And that's where a lot of times teachers will assign teacher assigned lessons. So once your child takes the test, they'll get put on a track, and the program does the work with regard to kind of moving and adjusting what your child needs. But the teacher may determine, no, I know that they're really struggling with say main idea and details. So the teacher may also assign teacher assigned lessons, and that could potentially be something that they give for homework, or that could be something that during like a center time, your child's working on the computer to build the strength in those areas where they're struggling. So backing up to remind about what the test looks like. So students are not expected to know every answer. Again, it's an adaptive test. So the questions get harder or easier based on how your child is answering. And that's why I said to our mama who was asking about our first grade kiddo. So again, try and back off on that help, because again, it does help. It does adjust based upon that. So it is different for every student. So sometimes our kids will look to the next computer screen and be like, well, you're not doing the same thing I'm doing, but that's what we need. That we want that. We want to make sure that the programs that we use and everything that we do is differentiated to meet the needs of your child. And then of course, those assessments are given 3 times per year and on the computer. I real quick I already wanted to note the different domains that are in each subject. So within the math domain, there are, within the math subject, there are different domains. So we have numbers and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. And the neat thing also about the program is that if your child continues to struggle in a certain area, the program will turn off that area. So say they're struggling with measurement and data, it will get turned off. The teacher is responsible for going in and kind of determining what was happening, have conversation with your child, turn it back on, do some reteaching to make sure that they're back on track to be able to be successful in that area. So it really is geared towards the partnership. The program also has the partnership with the teacher, just like you as the parent will have the partnership with the teacher, to make sure we're doing everything we can for each child, because certainly a computer screen never takes the place of a teacher. The teacher is able to mindfully adjust their instruction and do what it takes for your child so that they can give them the best possible education. And then as I switch screens, we're in the reading domains, and we have phonological awareness, phonics, high frequency words, vocabulary, comprehension of literature, and informational text. So we talked about Achieve being informational only, and then iReady is both literature and informational text. I did want to note for our younger kiddos, they will have phonological awareness and phonics open and high frequency words until they're done with it. So if they show proficiency, if they show success in those areas, the program will no longer need to test them, if you will, in those programs, or no longer to provide lessons in those areas, because they've shown that they're consistently successful. And that usually happens around 2nd or 3rd grade, that those things turn off, and then they focus more on the vocabulary and comprehension. As I move forward, here is what I want you to ask for with regard to iReady. So this just notes, I'm going to quickly note what this looks like. So this is the parent report, or part of the parent report. I kind of peeled it all apart to explain it to you, just a quick moment. So if we're looking at the parent report, depending upon what grade your child is, and again, this is a K-5 program, depending upon what grade your child is, it'll tell you what is on grade level. It'll show you up there at the top. So this is the green range, which would be on grade level in their target range, if you will, right? Then it will show you when they took the test, the scale score that they received, and then what is their placement level. And this one shows kind of an approaching, right? I'm almost to grade level. I'm not quite there yet. And so the intent of that is just to make sure that we really get a good snapshot visual of what range we're at. And then this really depicts over the 3 diagnostics. So this is an example of here, the first diagnostic given, the child fell within on grade level range. And then in the second diagnostic, which is in, depending upon the grade, right? So it's December or January. And then there'll be another one at the end of the year, which will be April or May. And so this child really strongly grew over the school year. And that was approximately 85 points, right? So that's pretty amazing. So that child will strongly be on track. And as you can see, it's a little bit hard to see, and my apologies for it being a little hard to see, that the child lands above grade level, and then that really kind of depicts each area. So if they're struggling in a certain area, they'll also give kind of suggestions on what to do for that. Now, there's 2 things with regard to where they fall. Let me back up 1 second. Once they take the first assessment, they will give them what's called their typical or stretch growth. So this is the amount of growth that we want them to make during the year. So the typical growth is the typical growth that a child would grow in 1 year. The stretch growth is if we use this program with fidelity, we're supporting the instruction of the teacher, we're making sure that all things are coming together, then hopefully the children are meeting their stretch growth. And we've seen roughly 25 to 35% of students will reach these higher targets. And I'll be very honest, I think more students can do that. Um, but it's because, I'm going to be honest here, we need to make sure that they're focused and attentive while they're on the screen. So a couple of things with that, right? So the attention piece is certainly hands down the number one. They need to be paying attention and they need to be actively engaged in what's happening on the screen. Because if they're clicking around, then again, it's adaptive, so it's going to dial back if they're getting things consistently wrong because they really don't feel like doing it right now. And I get it, because sometimes we don't feel like doing it. And so why I want you to be mindful, if your child is at home on iReady, make sure that they're in an area where they aren't distracted and that they can focus for a good amount of time. And what do I mean by a good amount of time? It's approximately 30 minutes that it takes for a lesson. And sometimes students on iReady get frustrated because they don't finish the lesson. And then when they get back on the computer, they restart the lesson, and they're annoyed because I saw this yesterday, so why am I having to do this? And that really comes into the frustration that they have when they're on iReady. So make sure that they're on long enough, about 30 minutes, to complete the lesson, and so that they'll roll into the next lesson after that one.
Okay, so that's a great segue, because another parent asked a question about, is 10 minutes on iReady math, 10 minutes on iReady reading, 10 minutes on Achieve mixed throughout the week, or just 20 minutes a day? 2 of 3 options enough? And so could you kind of give what that would look like, what you just said about the 30 minutes? What
Yes,
that would
I
look like?
appreciate that question. That's awesome. And I think that the teachers too also can provide really more specifics, but I will be very honest, I've been very in tuned to iReady over the past few years. And so I really can speak to that it should be at least 30 minutes on iReady consistently. And I know that's a tough one, right? Because as we're trying to balance things in life and just our kids not wanting to do it, that if they're not on long enough, again, they're going to be frustrated with that. So specific for iReady, it's about 30 minutes that they need to be on. And I don't mean every day. I'm hoping that it wouldn't be every day, because that's also where our kids are getting frustrated. So and they just don't look forward to it. Also with iReady, kids are more excited about the math than they are the reading. So maybe we need to put a few more incentives. And remember when I was talking back about celebrating, please, please, please celebrate with them once they achieve that 30 minutes or how they're doing. Like, stand over their shoulder for 3 minutes without telling them the answers. I know it's hard. I do it. I promise I do it. But stand over them and be like, yes, that was awesome. You did such a good job. It goes a long way. They light up and they really are kind of motivated to keep going, even if that keeps them going for 5 more minutes. And that can be something that you can regularly do to kind of get them through that. So that's something that I would appreciate you guys all for doing that. And then flipping on to Achieve.
Let me let
'Cause
me
that
let me
was
chime in one quick time, because I know a lot about iReady, and from what I do
Mhm.
understand is they do 45 minutes per subject a week. That's the
Correct.
typical on point time that the students are going to be making lessons. And I know they go to the computer lab probably twice a week for the 30 minutes, and so that's a total hour, but that gives them time for transition. They have to log in. Sometimes they're changing their avatar, and then when they finish those lessons, sometimes when they have success, they give them time to play games, like they reward them in the game. iReady gives them games to play for like brain breaks. So that's those times that aren't counted. So the sweet spot is 45 minutes a week
Agreed.
in each subject area. Okay.
Yes, and I appreciate you chiming in, because then I can further piggyback on that. So at the school level, your child should be getting 45 minutes of iReady and my brain isn't going to our e-learners, right? And so when they're assigned, it should be 45 minutes a week for that specific subject. 45 minutes, as Miss Fullwood mentioned, for reading, 45 minutes for math. And then I was, and thinking about the 30 minutes, was some of our students go home and do additional iReady, and that really is school specific. I'll be very honest about that. Some schools say, no, 45 minutes in the school, and that's where we're at. And some schools are a little more flexible with that, and they want their students to go home and work on a few more lessons. Then also in iReady, as we're looking at this slide, so I just want to mention again about the target and stretch growth. Sorry, typical growth and stretch growth. I just gave it a new name. That we want to make sure our children are gaining at least a year's worth of growth in a year's worth of time, but our eyes are set further than that, right? We want to make sure that they're as successful as they can possibly be. And so iReady shows you different stretch growth examples here, right? So they're showing you a child who was consistently 3 levels below where they're wanting that child to go during that school year and that stretch growth piece. And the same thing, so we're delivering stretch growth for every single child, no matter what their learning level is. And so if they're a higher achieving student, just a reminder, as they get up into those higher levels, it's a little bit harder for them. And so that stretch growth isn't as wide, and that's why. Then real quick, what to look for and what to ask at home. So this is what you'll see on their iReady when they open it up at home. And then they'll show you their time on task, which certainly helps. And then how many lessons have they passed, and what is their lesson streak, which is just phenomenal too. And so that lesson streak, that can be another area where you're celebrating their success. Also wanted to note, we're all kind of pretty good at this point with a lot of technology. And so obviously we're accessing the account through Clever, and then they will log in just like they typically would. And so I think that most of our families are pretty comfortable with that. If you are not comfortable with that, again, another place where you can be a strong advocate for yourself and your child and just say, hey, I know that all schools really have directions on how to get into our programs and what you need to be doing with them. All right, switching gears. We really were younger kiddos. Miss Fullwood, as you had noted, are most of our parents on here for younger students?
Yes, for the ones who did log in, it was mostly elementary.
Gotcha. I'm gonna hang tight with me, parents, and here's why. Because your child's younger now, but they are going to get older, and so I want to cover these things as we look forward to their success. We want to make sure that their eye is towards graduation, and these are some of the things that they need to be able to achieve as we're headed towards graduation. So real quick, we want to talk about the SAT suite of assessments. And these are assessments that are also connecting them to being college and career ready. And this just notes each assessment and kind of where they're taking those assessments at. But really, I did even speak to my colleagues about this earlier today, because I personally felt like this was quite early, right? So if you have a higher achieving child and they're wanting to do the PSAT, which is the practice SAT, just note that they may be a little frustrated because there is some Algebra 2 on there, really difficult math that they probably aren't going to get for a few more years. And I could be wrong. They could be rocking it and already doing those courses at a lower grade level. And so just note that we don't want to set them up for frustration. And so that is an area where you would speak to the guidance counselor about when is the best time for my child to be taking one of these assessments. And moving forward, the benefits to setting them up for success, right? So this is on the college board, and this is really an area where another partnership, if you will, right? So this partnership with us is to make sure that they're headed in the right direction. So the SAT suite of assessments, that kind of dials back to us, if you will, and we're able to help assist in this process. And so then they're being connected to scholarships. This also monitors kind of the equity of these assessments. So all of these assessments cost money, but if it's a child who is on free or reduced lunch, then they can receive waivers. They also have unlimited SAT score sends. There's a lot of benefits really to this program, and making sure that we're on track with moving your child towards their goals in their life. Because as noted on the bottom, there's also a career finder. So once your child is taking the SAT, PSAT, or SAT, they will have their own login. And I'll be very honest, this is an area that I'm a little surprised with, because the child, so this is where they become strong advocates, right? The child and you as the parent are the sole holders of that account. So we as a district do not access that account. So that's something that the child would have access to, or you as the parent and the family would have access to. But this account is kind of your ticket to understanding what everything about the SAT suite of assessments. They give you your total score, and then they break down different things for you. Course recommendations, again, like I mentioned, scholarship opportunities. But the thing that was exciting, to be honest, for me, is that there's free Khan Academy SAT prep. So if they link their Khan Academy account with their College Board account, then that monitors together kind of their path of growth and is able to help support them also. And that certainly was the short and sweet of the high school level of assessments, because again, we are having that other parent webinar that is covering kind of graduation requirements and what does my high school student need to graduate. All right, so quickly, and again, thank you parents for partnering with me tonight. And I know I keep going on, but I just am so passionate about making sure we're doing everything we possibly can to meet the needs of your kiddo. So real quick, I will note key progress indicators. So I had blew past the thing that said, what is progress monitoring, right? So we are moving forward into what are the key progress indicators. And these are attendance, we call it the ABCs. So us educators call it the ABCs: attendance, behavior, and course performance. And so I just want to quickly note how important it is that we understand what a big role attendance and behavior plays in your child's success. So the it's a little bit easier to see it on this next slide. As we move forward, so attendance, if you're in the green, right? So we're thinking about progress monitoring, and we progress monitor, or we monitor how are the children coming to school, because obviously we can't teach them if they're not in school. And so attendance is a big piece, and we're showing that within the green, students are more successful if their attendance is between 90 and 100. And I want to remind you also that it really matters for tardies or early sign-outs as well. And just a quick, I don't know, commercial, if you will, that if, say, there's an appointment that's necessary and it's once a week appointment, and they're consistently needing to leave early on a Thursday afternoon, but every Thursday afternoon is they have their reading class on that afternoon. So there's gonna be a hindrance to their education with that, and their growth is going to not be as strong as it could be if they were in that class. So just a quick reminder that how important attendance is for us, and it really indicates to just how successful they are. Suspensions, right? So behavior, whether they're paying attention, they're not getting in trouble, all of those things, they really has an impact on their education. And then of course, their coursework, their GPA. So our students with above a 2.26 GPA are more successful, right? And so those are ways that we monitor our students. And I want to talk about the MTSS system. So earlier I talked about who's a supporter within the school, and the school psychologist helps in this process. So it's the multi-tiered system of support, and it is for all students. I know when we talk about this, we really think about struggling learners, but we have supports in place for all students. Again, we've talked a lot about a lot of different assessments, and those are our data points, right? The many different data points that add up the snapshot and picture of how your child is doing. So if your child is consistently doing well on those assessments and they're following, they're getting kind of the universal supports or the supports that are happening across the board, those are considered tier 1 students, and they would be getting everything that every child is getting, right? Then as we move forward, a child may be receiving tier 2 support in one subject, or well, and that's a point that I do want to make. So it could be just one subject that they're struggling in, or it could be across the board. And those are the things that we will monitor also. In this targeted range, if they're a tier 2 student, we want to target them to receive an average of 90 minutes of intensive instruction. And this is on top of their core instruction that they receive, right? So if they're tier 2 and we've identified that they're struggling, we're providing them with more intensive services, and that's at least 90 minutes more per week of one-on-one focused, differentiated, intensive instruction. Then
Michelle, I would like to interject here that we are having a webinar on that one on this specifically on December 3rd.
Fantastic. Yes, so note that that will give us a lot of great information, and I'll quickly touch on then if your child is a tier 3 student, or once we've put into place those tier 2 supports, they're still continuing to struggle, we're going to add additional support. So those students will receive an average of 150 minutes, additional minutes of instruction per week in a differentiated manner to make sure we're meeting their needs. And then this slide, and as Ms. Fullwood mentioned, there's going to be another webinar specifically focused on the MTSS process and that progress monitoring. But just real quick, there are specific assessments also, and most of them are the ones we're already given. So I don't want you to stress that, oh my gosh, my child who's a struggling learner, now you're going to give them yet more tests. So that is not typical of what happens. It may need required a few more smaller assessments just to kind of get quick snapshots, because our larger assessments are so far apart. We want to make sure that we're monitoring them as we go, right? So if there's a beginning of the year assessment and a mid-year assessment, we don't want anything, we want to monitor in between those 2 times. And so a specific benchmark assessment may be given to your child to provide that progress monitoring. And that really kind of is what this slide also goes over, right? So we're also, while giving those interventions, I do want to note that we as a team sit, and this is also something that you as a parent will be notified at. A school should not be meeting about your child and making decisions without you knowing about those decisions being made. So that we would, as a team, collaboratively with you as the parent, establish reasonable and attainable goals so that we can make sure that we're on point with tracking their progress and making sure that they're consistently making progress. And if they're not making that progress, we need to determine why and be able to put in the appropriate supports for them. And we're getting there, I promise. We're almost to the end. This is the quick brochure of the MTSS. I know that this brochure will be on our website. And also, I think, Ms. Fullwood, we could add it in the links. Is that possible? If that's something that parents need.
I was going to allow our supervisor, Dr. Prevey, when she does it, to share it with the family.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, perfect. Well, and then in December, we will be getting that. All right. So here, as we're ending tonight, I appreciate your time. I did want to give some quick slides of resources, right, depending upon your child. So in the elementary school setting, there would be iReady, Myon, and Achieve, which are all on Clever, and we can access those from home. And then remember to ask what specific school-based resources there are for your child. Then with regard to middle school, you'll read the ones that are offered for middle school. And this is not a comprehensive list of end-all be-all resources for our kiddos. So I know that our schools really, some of them offer other resources because they've purchased things that are helping to support their children. For example, IXL sometimes for math or science is purchased, and that could be something that they're asked to do at home for homework. Or if they're e-learners, they might be asked to do that at home. Then of course, here we are with high school student resources. And again, the teachers are your number one partner to be able to tell you what are the best things that you can use. And then, of course, those other support systems in the schools if you need that additional support in any of those areas. So we are at the end, and I do say questions, but I just want to say thank you for staying with me and hanging with me. It was an hour and a half. I know Ms. Fullwood said about an hour, so I appreciate you so much. I want to remind you that you're amazing, and we can't do this without you. And so, again, I thank you, but please be a great advocate for your child. Please make sure you're asking questions. If you're not feeling like you're getting the right answer for those questions, and I guess maybe the right answer isn't the right word, but if you're feeling like the supports aren't in place, then we need to make sure as a district that we're doing everything we possibly can to support your kiddo. So please reach out. Start with the school, and that's the most important place to be able to work with the people who are directly supporting your child. So any questions as we are ending?
All right, thank you so much. I just wanted to say I really do appreciate you, Michelle, for sharing this great information. It was a lot. I know it was a lot to take in, but
Sure
parents
was, right?
really need to know what type of assessments their students are taking, and just to be aware and what types of questions to ask. Again, I thank you all for being patient and being with us.
Sure. Can I add something real quick before we go? Because
Okay.
I'm not going to sleep tonight if I don't. And so just real quick, I did want to note that as you're sitting with the teacher and you're having a conference, really look across the board. So make sure that all of these assessments, we're not putting all of our stock in one basket, right? So if they struggled on their Achieve assessment, but all the other assessments indicate that they're on level and they're on track and they're doing well, please listen to the other things and not just focus on the one that they're struggling with. certainly ask questions on how do we get that one on track and how do we get on point with that assessment. We want to make sure it's a holistic picture of everything that we are doing to support your child. And so there's many indicators to base how they're doing in their student achievement and their success.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. And I just wanted to let everyone know that November 5th at 4 o'clock is our next one. And it's about really behavior. Oops, my child is off task. Really for your e-learners, how to keep my child on task during e-learning. We're struggling. Help us out. So we have a great person to come and present, expert in behavior management and keeping your child focused. So be with us. Again, I put our YouTube page inside the chat. Subscribe and you will get all of the recorded videos, including this one, will be posted and share with all your family and friends. Until next time, so long, everyone. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.